Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Updates and New Federal Stimulus Funds for Childcare Impacted by COVID-19. Before we get started, I would like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. When you join today's webinar, you selected to join either by phone call or audio or computer audio. If for any reason you would like to change your selection, you can do so by accessing your audio pane in your control panel. This webinar is being recorded. All participants are placed on mute for quality assurance. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenters by typing in your questions into the questions pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time. We will collect these and address them during the Q&A sessions throughout and at the end of today's presentation. I would now like to turn it over to Kathy Glazer.
Thank you, Val, and welcome to everyone. So glad that you've been able to join us this evening for a briefing to learn more about the new federal stimulus funds that Virginia has received to support childcare programs impacted by the pandemic. Our agenda this evening will flow as follows. First, we'll hear from Virginia's First Lady, Pam Northam, who will share greetings and comments. And then Jenna Conway, who is the Chief School Readiness Officer, will provide the briefing detail. And then she and Tara Ragland, the Director of Licensing Programs at the Virginia Department of Social Services, will be on hand to answer your questions. And with that, it is an honor to welcome our First Lady, Pam Northam.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Kathy. I appreciate you having me today. Thank you to the ECF and to all of you, the providers, for being with us this evening. We are always so appreciative of each and every one of you and our entire early childhood care and education community in Virginia. We know that you have been courageously and tirelessly working to support and reassure our children and parents during these uncertain times, even when you may feel overwhelmed yourself. Mr. Rogers said that when there were scary times, his mother always told him to look for the helpers. There will always be helpers, and they will give you hope. The governor and I thank you for being outstanding helpers. We really appreciate everything that you're doing now, the sacrifices you're making to keep your family, your students, and your community safe. Many of you know that as a pediatric therapist and educator myself, my focus has been to expand access to quality early childhood care and education to all Virginia children, no matter who they are or where they live, and to tell everyone about the incredible work that you all, our amazing teachers, do each and every day. Over the past 2 years, my team and I have traveled over 5,000 miles across the Commonwealth, visiting centers and families. I've had so much fun visiting your outstanding centers, reading to children, and meeting many of you. And I look forward to getting back on the road again really soon. Now more than ever, it has been abundantly clear that the most important part of Virginia's early learning system is you, our superhero teachers. We know these are challenging and unprecedented times, which is why the governor and I fought hard to allocate the $70 million as quickly as possible from the Federal CARES Act to get it to you to ensure safe, stable childcare for our most essential workers and to better support you. The Commonwealth is strong. Our children are resilient, and together we will get through this. Thanks to partners like you, I look forward to what we will all accomplish together for our children and a brighter future. I'll leave you with the gentle but powerful words of Mr. Rogers again. We live in a world in which it's easy to say, it's not my child, not my community, not my world, not my problem. Then there are those who see the need and respond. I consider those people my heroes. So thank you for everything you do to give me hope each day. Now for the experts. Virginia's Chief School Readiness Officer, Jenna Conway, will share a presentation with you on how these new emergency funds will be used, and she will be able to answer your questions. Jenna works directly out of my office and is leading the transformation of Virginia's early childhood education. Not only is she a nationally recognized expert in the field, she's also a mother of 3 young children herself. She has already expanded access for thousands of Virginia's children since starting in this new role. And despite this difficult period, we look forward to what the future holds. Thanks so much. Jenna, take it away.
Wonderful. Thank you, First Lady, and thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening. Huge thank you to the Early Childhood Foundation, Kathy, Val, and the team for assembling this webinar. We are excited to be able to offer this briefing again, especially for our participants tonight who are running family day homes and often find it impossible to attend many of the webinars that occur during the day. And so glad to be here this evening. As the First Lady noted, I am the parent of a 6-year-old and 4-year-old and 2-year-old, so I can't guarantee that we won't be interrupted by loud voices in the background. But again, just appreciate folks joining us tonight after, for many people we know, has been a long day supporting kids and families during this incredibly difficult time. With my partner, Tara Ragland from the Department of Social Services, what we'd like to do is walk you through an update on where we are as a state. I know it can be really isolating right now in terms of kind of what's happening and sort of how your program is affected. So kind of give you the data as we know it today on the status of early childhood in the Commonwealth. Talk about things as relates to emergency childcare, the map of the state, talk about PPE, and then of course the feature item, walk you through how we heard from you, use your input to inform the governor's decision on how to expend the $70 million to support childcare through the federal stimulus or the CARES Act. We'll then, at that point, once walking you through that, open it up for questions. As we know, some of you have begun, some of you have not yet, and so just want to be available to take questions. As Val noted, if you type in your questions during the session, Kathy and Val will help us get to those as they come up as well. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we've heard as we've done these webinars and had conversations with providers across the Commonwealth is it's a really isolating time, right? Whether you're staying in your home and whether you're open and just have this limited number of families coming, whether you're closed and feeling more disconnected than ever from your employees, your colleagues, or your kids and families, we found it useful just to give everybody the landscape of the state so you understand kind of what's going on across the board. A lot of the briefings provided by the governor and others focus on the healthcare situation, but we wanted tonight to take some time to talk about what the current situation is as relates to early childhood. We are tracking Department of Social Services in partnership with Child Care Aware, sort of how many of our programs are opened and closed. As everybody on the phone knows, our public and private schools, K-12, including all preschools on those facilities, have been closed and will remain closed for the duration of the school year. Child care is not closed. Again, we recognize the essential role that child care plays until child care is opened. However, as you'll see in these statistics in front of you, the majority of our larger centers, whether that's our child day centers or our religious exempt preschools, are closed. So roughly 63% of our child day centers are still reporting themselves as temporarily closed, and the same percentage of our religious exempt preschools. So the vast majority of our larger facilities are closed at this point in time. In contrast, and we're glad so many of you are here tonight with us, only about 1 in 4 of our family day homes are reporting to us as closed at this point in time. So we wanted to take a moment to recognize the going above and beyond that many of our family day home providers have done, really remaining open to serve our essential personnel, to kind of serve those families who need childcare during this time. Collectively, about 2,600 programs are closed across the state, representing a loss in capacity of about 200,000 slots across the system. So pretty significant. 1.2 million kids out of school across public and private K-12 under age 12, 200,000 slots missing from our childcare system. So again, across the board, this is an unprecedented pandemic. We wanted to clarify any misconfusion or sort of miscommunication or confusion about the fact that childcare is allowed to be open. Particularly our smaller settings like our family day homes are providing an essential role in their communities. In addition, your educators, whether it's you yourself as the proprietor of a Family Day home or any of the educators who work with you or for you, are essential personnel. Let there be no confusion about that, and that we in fact put a letter on the Department of Social Services and Department of Education website indicating that you are essential and should be priority for critical supplies, in case there's any question about that. So again, childcare can remain open even with the executive order, the stay-at-home order. Your staff and you are essential personnel, and we are working kind of to explore how do we continue to support you through this process. We know it's incredibly trying. We're now entering sort of week 5+ of the shutdown, and not sure about how you all feel about it, but it feels like 5 weeks is 5 years, is 500 years in terms of the duration of this. And so we know that everybody's nerves are frayed. We know that folks are exhausted. And again, just wanted to recognize how many of our Family Day homes are remaining open or reopened and are continuing to serve those essential personnel who not only keep our health and hospital system running, who are not only our first responders, police, firefighters, EMT, but all those individuals as this crisis goes on, who keep our society running, whether it's our food supply chain from the factory to the field to the grocery store, whether it's key retail, cleaning supplies, our Target, our Walmart, whether it's our bus drivers or the folks who pick up our garbage. Again, as we're realizing with pandemic, those are the folks who are kind of most essential for our society to continue to function. And for all of those folks who have kids or are responsible for kids, they need childcare and are relying on you to be able to take care of their kids, keep themselves, give them some sense of normality, throughout the duration of what is proving to be a really extended crisis. With that, let me start to talk about what we're doing to kind of respond. So that gives you a sense of where we're at as a state, right? As we're now kind of, again, going into week 5 or 6, depending on how you're counting, of our response to the coronavirus and COVID-19. As we have done through partnership with the Early Childhood Foundation, with providers, with the Child Care Association, with Voices and other groups across the state, kind of hearing from the field has helped us, in addition to looking at the health data and looking at this data I've presented to you, determine what our priorities are. And there's sort of 2 clear priorities right now for government in responding to this crisis. The first of which is to continue to make sure there's enough emergency childcare for our essential personnel, broadly defined, as I just did, kind of across the state, right? And again, the rate of programs closing has slowed down, but as you see at the top of this page, we still have a lot more centers closed than open. And so making sure that we have enough childcare through duration of the crisis. Our second priority is around using the $70 million that we received expediently in the CARES Act. This is child care stimulus funding we received about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, to support the field. And so I'll talk about both of these areas, but want you to know that based on what we heard from you all, what we're hearing from the field, that these are our top 2 priorities. Next slide, please. So I'll talk first about ensuring there's enough emergency child care. And again, I think as we go back to the beginning, when we first began to shut down the state, when there were sort of deep concerns about when the public health crisis would peak, what might be required of our health and hospital system, whether we would have enough bed and ventilator capacity, whether we'd be able to staff our health and hospital system, our long-term care facilities. We've been working very closely, Social Services, Department of Education, with Child Care Aware Virginia and all of our communities across the state to make sure we have enough emergency child care for essential personnel. One of the things we wanted folks to be aware of is that we do, and thanks to the work of Child Care Aware Virginia, now have a website with a map that's available for communities across the state as you're grappling with this question of, do we have enough emergency child care? We were concerned we might have to use facilities like schools and municipal city government buildings and other spaces, while also wanting to really encourage our families to go first to the experts, our Family Day homes, our child care centers, our programs that were remaining open, because we know you are the experts. We know you are prepared to go. You are quintessentially shovel ready, as you kind of some of you haven't even closed at all throughout this period. And again, making sure that there was just enough capacity. So We wanted everybody, if you look at that URL or that website at the bottom of the page, that's a website in any community in the Commonwealth. You can go and look. You can use a map to kind of drill down into community. It shows you who's open, who's closed, proximity to hospitals, and generally provides like what's available and what's not in your community. We thought this was really important as folks were saying, well, do I need to open up a bunch of pop-up or emergency settings? In most places in the Commonwealth, what we're hearing is there's not a need to open a bunch of new facilities. In fact, that with our existing family day homes, thanks to their Herculean efforts to stay open with our existing childcare programs that are open, roughly that 40%, that we have enough capacity, at least as it stands right now, to make sure that we can sort of handle the needs of our health and hospital system, of our first responders, and of our other essential personnel. I also show this map to say if you go onto this map and you don't see your site listed, or if the data is not correct, please go to vachildcare.com and update your profile. So again, this is the resource when we tell parents to call 866-KIDS-TLC. This is the resources that they're getting to. This is the key resource when we kind of work with the governor, when we work with the community, when we work with the Health and Hospital Association, that kind of captures all of the information on who's open, who's not, whether there's enough slots in a community. And so if you are open and available to take kids, please make sure your information is updated on this website so that we can be sure to let essential personnel, let communities know that you are open and available to take kids. Next slide, please. Another issue that has kind of come up as relates to emergency childcare, and those of you who are remaining open, and we need you to stay open in order to serve all of our essential personnel, is the issue of personal protective equipment. And we know that this has been an issue for our health and hospital system. We know it's been an issue for our grocery and our food supply chain, and we know it's been an issue for you. And so just wanted to highlight some information that Child Care Aware Virginia sent around recently around kind of the ability to purchase some health and sanitation supplies. And if some of you say, I've got resources, but what I don't have is somebody I can go to purchase it. So two key things here, as I noted before, there's now a letter on the DOE, the Department of Education, and the Department of Social Services website on their COVID pages that you can print a letter saying that you're essential, that some folks are finding effective if they go to their Walmart or go to their Kroger to kind of, be able to purchase more than the limit that typical kind of, folks can, or to kind of, be sort of made aware and new supplies become available. There's also food and supply source, and this information went out via Child Care Aware recently about some personal protective equipment or PPE and hand sanitizers that are available for purchase at bulk supply and prices. So if you need those materials, whether it's masks, smocks, hand sanitizers, soap, wipes, all of those things that are really kind of hard to find now, I really encourage you to check out this resource, which is, again, takes a little time there's a little bit of a lead time there, but be thinking about as this sort of thing goes on, what you might need, and wanted to make folks aware of this resource. Next slide, please. So those slides talked a little bit about emergency childcare, our priority one, making sure that you know you're essential, that we need you. Those of you who are open to continue to stay open to serve health and hospital workers, first responders, and other essential personnel, including our grocery workers, our bus drivers, and our our folks who keep society running. We recognize there's a need to kind of make sure you're on the map and making sure your rooms are full to the extent possible. And so we're really kind of encouraging you to check out that website if your information is not correct, as well as as we come across resources related to PPE and other key sanitation supplies, making sure we're getting them to you. Our second priority is figuring out how to get more direct financial resources to you. And I think we've heard loud and clear, for whether you're open or closed, that your financial situation is dramatically different than when it was on March 1st. And we've heard kind of through conversations across the state, whether it's because you went to a smaller group size, whether it's because parents are feeling like it's not safe to go to your program anymore, simply because it's just not safe to be out of the home, whether it's that parents want to come to your program, but they've just lost their job and they can't afford childcare anymore, whether you're temporarily closed and really trying to make that difficult decision on, do I help my folks go into unemployment? Do I try to make one more payroll? We just know that there's been a lot of hurt experienced by the early childhood sector over the last month. So we knew we had the opportunity to respond to the recent passage of the Corona Aid Relief and Economic Security Act, or the CARES Act. We jumped right on it. So this was a bipartisan act that was passed by the U.S. Congress, enacted at the end of March, and provided Virginia with $70 million to use explicitly or specifically to support childcare in the Commonwealth. It is supposed to support the parents of young kids who are sort of critical to the workforce, includes healthcare, includes emergency responders, and again, includes that broader definition of essential personnel. They provided a lot more, they being the federal government, provided a lot more flexibility than they typically do. And so they said you can use to pay folks who are open now and need support to keep going. You can use it to pay folks that are closed. You can use it to pay programs that are not part of the subsidy program. So for those of you who may not be part of the child care subsidy program, as you know, that program is really the priority for the federal government. And so oftentimes the resources that come from DC, we have to dedicate those to the subsidy program. In this case, recognizing that the hurt experienced by the sector went far beyond the subsidy program. They provided us with some additional flexibility to provide those resources to you. And they don't require matching funds, so there's a lot less strings attached. So we worked very closely, Department of Social Services, Department of Education, worked with the field and with the governor's office to figure out how we could, in fairly short order, get these resources to you. Next slide, please. So what I'd like to do is explain what we heard from the field as the needs that were most pressing, how we're approaching using these resources, and then I'll go into the most detail on the cash assistance for programs that are open, because we imagine that's probably the majority of the folks who are on with us tonight. So we heard 4 really distinct needs from the field, and really wanted to advise the governor, here are the things that we're hearing from Virginians that are needed to support the early childhood or child care sector, and then think about how to use these dollars in the most fair, expedient, and effective manner. So the first goal, and the most important, and where we've dedicated the most resources, is to supporting those providers who are open to serve children during the pandemic. And so, full stop, if we want to be able to rely on the experts and go to our programs that have remained open or are willing to reopen right now to serve essential personnel, we have to get them some cash assistance. We know that there are a bunch of reasons that it's tough to stay open right now: additional cost for cleaning, sanitation, hero pay, or sort of hazard pay, smaller group sizes, parents not coming. So a variety of reasons. And so the top priority was to use this funding to provide resources to child care providers that are open and willing to serve essential personnel over the course of April, May, and June. This funding, as I'll describe in a second, is not going to be based on attendance, because we know that's kind of tricky during a time like this. And also when kids or families are exposed, we don't want to kind of have them come in. So it's actually a cash assistance program based on program size, first of its kind in the Commonwealth. That's priority number 1, serving those providers who are staying open, regardless of whether or not they've been a part of the subsidy program, because we know all of you are critically important in making sure our essential personnel can continue to work and society can continue to function during this time. Our second priority was really sort of more supports, intensive supports for families on our subsidy program. So again, we know that our families on our child care subsidy program are among our most vulnerable in the Commonwealth. We know that everybody's wallets are stretched thin right now and kind of facing really difficult financial choices and situations. And so the second way in which Virginia will use this funding is to provide families who are participating in the child care subsidy program with relief. So we will cover their co-payments from April 1st to June 30th. And so again, those co-payments will go into the provider payment, and families will get a break from co-payments for these 3 months. We also think it's important when there are kind of cases where there might be emergency child care opening up, and so making sure that we're not somehow having programs leave their home programs simply because they can't afford to make that copay. So again, support to our low-income families who rely on child care subsidies and who make our buses run, who keep our stores operating, who really keep society functioning. Our third priority was to support our providers in the child care subsidy program, even those that are closed. And so when we a few weeks ago, we rolled out with a set of changes to the subsidy program to support folks during that time. And in order to encourage folks to stay open, the state made the decision that we would provide extended absence payments for programs that were open and willing to serve essential personnel. We realized as we looked at the challenges being faced by the field that a good number of our subsidy programs have closed for a variety of reasons. And we need those programs to be there to serve our vulnerable families when we come back. And so a third way in which we will use this funding is to cover absence payments for additional days, even if we have a subsidy program that is temporarily closed. And so we roughly covered about up to 40 additional days, or roughly 8 weeks, for programs that were open on the subsidy program if kids weren't able to attend for whatever reason. And we are now opening that provision for our closed programs. So for those of you who might be temporarily closed, please know that you can submit those manual absent payments, and that we need you to kind of be a part of the subsidy program when you open back up in order to make sure that our low-income Virginians have access to a range of programs. And lastly, just making sure that we have an additional fund of money so that if we need backup emergency childcare in schools, if there are not enough options in the private sector. And so we have a small pool of funding to supplement the cost of backup emergency childcare in public schools if needed. And as I noted before, I think at the beginning of this, we thought we would need this because most of the private centers would close. We have reached a place in the Commonwealth where we're pretty steady state. We have a lot of capacity still open. And so we really see the kind of school option only as a backup in case of emergency. Next slide, please. So as I noted before, we've got these 4 areas, and just wanted to make sure that folks knew how to apply for each of the 4 areas, or how to, seek assistance. So the first one is for the new Direct Cash Assistance Program. And again, I will talk, and Tara will talk in more detail about that, but you can always go to the Social Services website. They have a specific COVID micro page that you can look at. And as we'll talk in a second, a new email address so that you can email your questions and applications directly. For our providers who are participating in the Child Care Subsidy Program, who may be temporarily closed and have not sought those absent payments, please check out the FAQs to see if you have any kind of questions answered, and then submit your questions and or invoices to vendor services at dss.virginia.gov. So again, taking more manual payments, manual processing to help you during this time. You don't need, for instance, the signature of the parent if that can't be obtained at this time. For communities or public schools where there's not enough capacity in the private sector, you're thinking about emergency child care, really referring those folks to contact the superintendent at doe.virginia.gov. And then again, for families on the child care subsidy program, they should be aware that they don't need to make co-payments for April, May, or June. there's any questions or concern about that, they can contact their local departments of social services. There were some cases where folks had already paid for April and kind of guidance has been provided on how to support those parents, kind of make them whole in that regard. But families participating in the child care subsidy program do not need to make co-payments for April, May, or June. And if there's any questions about that, they can either go check out those FAQs or to get a person to contact their local Department of Social Services. With that, what I'd like to do is shift into a little bit more detail about the largest investment that's part of the CARES Act, which is the direct cash assistance to programs that are open. If we could go to the next slide, please. So when we made a proposal to the governor, as I just walked us through, we said there were 4 needs, but really wanted to highlight that the single biggest need was to support the open childcare programs. And so roughly half of the budget for the CARES Act funding for this new stimulus funding is dedicated to supporting our open childcare programs. We know that that's a significant amount of funding, but we also know that you all are the programs that have indicated to us the most need, and we need you to stay open to support our essential personnel. I should note, however, and I've said this in all of our webinars, that even 35 million ballpark, half of the 70 million doesn't completely address all of the financial loss experienced by the early childhood or child care sector over the last 5 weeks. And so it's important that Virginia get these resources to you. It's important that we help address these needs and we take advantage of every opportunity, like these new federal dollars, and get them out to the field. On the other hand, just want to be transparent with everybody that the losses experienced go in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And the CARES Act only represents a small portion of that, an important portion, but a small portion. And so we continue to work with VESAF, with our community partners, with Smart Beginnings across the state to help providers take advantage of every opportunity, every funding resource out there as we're trying to kind of close the gap and make up for some of the damage and the financial hurt everybody experienced over the last 5 weeks. So as I said, at least half of this new funding is dedicated to programs that are open during the pandemic. This is for the first time. This is not limited to programs in the child care subsidy program. So again, you do not have to be participating in child care subsidy to be eligible for this new financial assistance program. Licensed child day centers, religious exempt child day centers, licensed family day homes, voluntarily registered family day homes, local ordinance family day homes, as well as subsidy providers are all eligible to receive this assistance for April, for May, and or June. So whether you're open for 3 months, 2 months, or 1 month, you are eligible. This is funded slightly different from other programs. Oftentimes you're funded based on attendance, but we understand that attendance goes up and down, and with a public health crisis, we don't want to encourage anybody to come to centers when they're sick, right? We know that if you're sick, fever, you stay home, you stay safe. And so this is supplemental funding that's based on your size. And so I walk through an example here, but it's basically a monthly payment of $25 times half of your licensed capacity for each week you provide care to children. So if your site's capacity was 50 kids, regardless of how many kids showed up, your grant amount would be 25 times 25, or $625 a week for each of the weeks, and then $2,500 for the 4-week period or the month. So again, cash assistance based on size rather than attendance. And again, using whatever your licensed capacity is or your registered capacity, using that number. To be eligible, a program must be open for the month applied for. And again, you can apply for 1, 2, or 3 months, April, May, and or June. Be willing to provide care for children of essential personnel. And again, you don't have to have kind of essential personnel. What we want is to make sure we have enough capacity, that you're on that Child Care Aware Virginia website. So if a worker at a grocery store or a janitor needed care, that they could call you and that you would be open and willing to provide care for children of essential personnel. to comply with some enhanced health and safety requirements. They're included in the application, keeping to a group size of 10 or fewer, sort of extra diligence on cleaning and sanitation. I think all reasonable things, that based on best advice from the Virginia Department of Health and the Center for Disease Control nationally. And you have to apply. I know this is sometimes confusing. There's a million things out there. Stimulus, some checks arrive directly in your bank account. Some you have to apply for. This is one you have to apply for. And we know that thousands of folks across the state have already applied, but really making sure that you apply, your colleagues apply. We think, knock on wood, I should be careful with everything happening with the Small Business Administration. We think there are more than enough resources in the system based on our budget. And so this is not going to be like the PPE where you got to get in first to kind of get it. Again, we've got, we think that there are adequate resources for everybody who's open right now. And so want to take a little pressure off your shoulders, but you do have to apply in order to receive the assistance. And what you see in the bottom right-hand corner, in case there's any confusion about, the multiple applications, think of this as the aqua or the turquoise one for the Department of Social Services, but that's the snapshot of what the application looks like and can be submitted via fax or email. I'll talk a little bit more about that. But this is the CARES application that goes to the Department of Social Services. Next slide, please. So last but not least, wanted to give a few tips about applying based on what the folks have heard so far. And again, we've got Sarah and her team of experts available to take questions. But this is new. It's always a balancing act between moving quickly and also learning as you go, right, as we're standing this up. And so want to acknowledge that, we are working as quickly as we can across government to get things approved. But, this has been a learning process for us as well. We have added some additional content. It's in the handout section of your webinar and also available on the DSS COVID site, but some FAQs, information about applying, includes this checklist, which is really important. You have to make sure your application is complete before submitting. Look up what type of program you are, make sure you have all of these materials. Otherwise you'll get an indicator that it's incomplete. And then if you send in things without a cover sheet, it might get lost. We have thousands of applications, as I noted earlier, coming in. And so, we are able as a state to most sort of expediently process when we have a complete application. So all of your form filled out, sign, check, and double check. Make sure we have all of these materials, the copies of these materials before you submit. Make sure you mark all the months you will be open to provide care of essential personnel. So again, this is for April, May, and June. If you think you're going to be open for all of those months, go ahead and check it off now so you don't have to completely apply. And we can we'll double check each month that you're open. But if you think you're going to remain open for the duration, please check all months now. Makes your life a little bit easier. Submit your application as one PDF. I know for all of us, this pandemic has us using technology in a whole bunch of different ways we never thought. But one of the things we're really encouraging folks to do is get all your documents into one PDF. If you've got a scanning machine, scan them and then use one of the free apps to combine them as a PDF, whether that's Adobe or something else. If you don't have a scanning machine, they have a lot of now free scanning apps on your phone, Genius Scan, other things. I think there's an Adobe version. Take a picture. It's much easier to kind of put them all in one document. So you can you have a copy and then you can sort of submit your full application together. But it is really helpful and helps speed up the process if you submit your application as one PDF rather than like 5 or 6 different documents at different times. You can either do fax or you can do email. So whatever works better for you. Either way, make sure to keep a record of your application. And then if there are any questions at any point in the process, this is the email address to ask questions to. So ask for care@dss.virginia.gov. As you might imagine, I think we announced this Wednesday, about 2 weeks ago, just under 12 days ago. I think we had over 500 applications on Thursday, 1,000 by the weekend. So a lot of volume right now. We are excited. It means that we're getting the word out there, but it also means that we're scrambling to handle questions and process applications. So please be patient, but know that we have one dedicated email address, and this is the resource which you should send all questions to. So with that, again, wanted to thank everybody. Wanted folks to be aware, right, that we know that there have been a lot of challenges experienced by the early childhood sector. Huge shout out to our programs who are remaining open, particularly our Family Day Home programs. 3 out of 4 of you are open, are serving our families and kids, and are a lifeline during this difficult time. Want to make sure that your program is reflected on that map of Child Care Aware Virginia. Want to make sure that you know where you can purchase PPE, and then want to make sure that you are aware of how we're using the $70 million that we just got to support you during this difficult time, with the top priority making sure that everybody who's eligible for it applies for this new cash assistance program through the Department of Social Services. So with that, Kathy, Val, Tara, and team, I will turn it over to you all to take the new questions.
Thanks so much, Jenna. Lots of great information, and we have a few questions that have come across, and we'll just remind folks to make sure and type your questions in the question box, and we'll get to as many of them as possible. One of the questions, I think we may want to go back to this slide. Somebody's asking for the information again about ordering essential supplies. So maybe back to this site that shows, yeah. Just want to make sure we're sharing that information. Thank you. Also, let's see, someone wondered about where they go to make sure that they're reporting that they're open and able to serve additional children. Here we go. Thank you. Your slides are fabulous and provide lots of great information. And I think sometimes just seeing them again and repeating the answers is really helpful. So I think we've gotten this question before, but let's run it again. If you're permitted through Fairfax County Office for Children, is this provider eligible for these grants?
So yeah, this is Tara. So yes, we are opening the grant application process to those that are under the ordinance in Northern Virginia. We do, however, I think we reached out to those folks, I think last week, to give a little bit different venue to getting involved and getting an application to us, just because it was a little bit different. So we've been working with the folks in Northern Virginia for that. So we have a little bit different application. If you want to email the Ask for Cares mailbox, we can send that information to you. It just basically, we received a spreadsheet, I think, from the folks up there, so we could, expeditiously get folks under that umbrella involved in this process. So yes, we can and will be accepting applications from those folks with the in the Northern Virginia Fairfax area.
Excellent, thank you. A couple more questions about making application. Do we need a DUNS number for the W-9?
No. I mean, basically, and this may be just a good time to kind of interject some of the changes that we have had to undertake this week in particular. So if you have an EIN number, that's really what we're asking for on the COVA W-9 form, which is also on the website that we've had up there, the dss.virginia.gov. It can be found there. And we really do prefer that folks use that particular form if at all possible. I know that we've had some instances where we we'll use the federal form. When folks don't have access to the other or have access to that information, we definitely prefer the Virginia form if you can at all, make that happen at all possible. We are just reminding folks, if you do have an EIN number, not to put a social security number on there as well. That's more, if you have the EIN number, make sure the corporation number and the person completing the form doesn't put their name as the legal name, that it goes in as the corporation. And just to clarify, one of the things I think we spoke about and that we had even on our application was we were asking people where they wanted their payment mailed to. So we're going to be changing that on our application. And so for those of you who have already filled it out, there's no need to worry about it. We're going to try to take care of that on the back end. But what we have found out through our finance department and some for audit purposes, we have to mail the payment to the corporation. So if you are involved with a corporation, say like a Miniland or something like that, then your check will be mailed to the corporation. So I don't think that's going to be a huge shift for folks, but we just wanted to make sure that you're aware of that, and we're going to include that on the acceptance letter, so you'll have that information at hand. And then we're also just going to remind you that if you do, or if you are a part of a corporation, when you do receive your acceptance letter, you may want to make sure that you send your corporation a copy of that, just for their audit purposes and as a double check that you've received the correct amount, or that the corporation has received the correct amount. So we had to back up and punt on that issue today and over the weekend, but hopefully that won't be an issue moving forward.
Thanks, Tara. And a couple of questions about once applications have been submitted, how long should will they receive an email that that the application has been received? When should they expect to receive the check? Just a little bit of information about timeline that they should expect.
So we're trying not to nail down too many timelines so we don't disappoint anyone. I think we've talked a little bit about, our hope is that we try to have everything payment made by May 15th, if at all possible. That's going to be dependent on a couple different things. One, when you apply. One, if there's any, two, if there's any issues, related to the application process, if we had to go back and request additional information or something like that. But we don't want to get too caught up in a timeline, just because as Jenna alluded to and as we've talked about, we set this process up very quickly, and it's kind of a moving process as we go through this. And we have other folks that we have to work with, our finance folks, and then the checks are cut from a different area as well. So there's a lot of hands in the pot, so to speak. So we will have an approval letter that'll go out via email, and then the folks in finance will cut the checks. But our goal is that we should see those start to roll out around the 15th of May, but it could be a little later as well. And so if we think that it's going to be a lot later, we'll keep you updated via our website. So keep checking in after the 15th if you haven't received something. But again, just a reminder that this is new to licensing in terms of being able to process this, and we want to get this in your hands just as quickly as possible. But again, our goal is to roll out the checks as soon as we can. So you may see them sooner, but don't panic if you don't see them by then. But
thank you, Tara. So while they should expect, once they've submitted their application, at some point they'll either receive an email with indication that the application was incomplete and explaining what else they need to submit, or they would receive at some point an email stating that their application has been approved, and then afterward a check would be mailed to them, hopefully by May 15th for the April payment, but a little bit of grace asked on that timeline. Is that correct?
That's Kathy. That's correct.
Okay. And the checks will be mailed. Someone's asking if direct deposit could be set up.
Unfortunately not. We're doing manual checks in this process, just because of the way that we've had to set this up. And again, it's a very we've had a very quick turnaround regarding this, and there would be a whole lot of probably more time that it would take if we had to do that. So it will be manual checks at this point. So we're sorry about that.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure happy to receive in whatever format. Thank you. We have a couple of questions about what is the first step to reopening our school to essential personnel? Do you have any advice for providers who may be closed now but are thinking that as circumstances change that they may reopen?
So this is Tara. I think, I can, Jenna may want to chime in on this, but I think that anytime that you're looking to reestablish connection, you need to make sure that there's that the safety aspect is being looked at, that the cleaning schedules and certain things go into play prior to accepting, children back. I think, we understand that there's use of PPE now that we're going to have to use in some instances, and making sure that staff would have an understanding of, how to don that equipment appropriately. And there's information on our website related to that, I believe, and I think you can find that at the CDC as well. But Jenna, do you have any other words of wisdom for folks?
Yeah, great question, and glad to hear that. And I think that's really a sign of us, figuring out how to work through this new normal. I would echo everything that Tara said on going to the website, looking at the guidance. I think it's gotten a lot clearer. So if you haven't gone there recently, but the CDC guidance is clear. They have protocols you might want to think about in terms of PPE, in terms of checking temperatures, in terms of maybe removing some materials that are harder to clean from the space where kids are served. So there's just a lot more available guidance than there was even a few weeks ago, which is good. So really encouraging people to start there. I think the second piece would be, health and safety first. I think the second piece would be relationships. And so letting families know that you're open again. If you are letting kind of licensing know that you're open again, and then Child Care Aware Virginia that you're opening again, to sort of putting feelers out there, and kind of, and checking in with folks. I will say that, we are hearing from families, a national survey was recently done of families, and families have some deep fears about health and safety. And so really would encourage folks, if you're thinking about opening, to not only do those practical things, but think about with your families who you know so well, how can you address some of those fears and concerns, right? How can you walk them through? Here's what we different. Thinking about kind of drop-off protocols, all of those sorts of things. But I don't want providers or any of us to kind of underestimate just some of the work that will need to be done for families to feel safe again. And again, I think this is just, has less to do with kind of a lot of specific cases, right, or bad stories from childcare. It's not grounded necessarily in fact, but I just think anytime you have something so widespread, so much kind of fear on the media, kind of in our society, it's created some very real fear as you look at survey results of families. And so really encouraging folks to not only practically think about health and safety, but from a relationship in a kind of perception perspective, think about how you might start reaching out to your families, maybe sort of doing a call with families in advance and walking them through what's going to be different as relates to health and safety, right? Spending some time with your teachers, with your staff, walking them through what's different in terms of health and safety, but really helping kind of everybody who's a part of your program to be prepared and sort of, to kind of come back, helping them feel healthy and safe. And then lastly, just want to acknowledge that, our kids have been through a lot. Oftentimes the adults will talk to other adults about self-care. And we know that our kids have been oftentimes eyewitnesses to a lot of stress and concern and trauma, and just helping prepare yourself, your teachers, right? We're coming back means another change in routines, means some disorientation after being out of programs for a while. So really preparing your families and your staff, your colleagues, to be super responsive to kids' emotional needs as they come back. again, with, sort of in that order, health and safety, relationship, and then kind of that social emotional needs of kids being our kind of 1, 2, 3 as you're thinking about recovery.
Super important. Thank you, Jenna. Then a couple of questions from folks about as programs want to update their information. You've mentioned on Child Care Aware's site, they're asking for a little bit of more information about how to do that. You want to walk them through what that process looks like. And then do you have any guidance for, as more programs decide to reopen, what would be the expectation or the desire for how frequently to update on their openings and their vacancies or their situation changes?
Sure. So Sarah, do you want to answer that? Or want me to?
No, go ahead.
So I think if you are a provider, if your information appears outdated, just to recomplete, there's a survey linked on that page. Is the easiest way to kind of update your profile. And if you're, you can also log into your profile. So either complete the survey that kind of pops up on the screen, log into your profile if you know your login to do that. If you have difficulty doing either of those, you can always call the 1866 number and they can walk you through it. But survey, profile, or the 866 number is kind of the key tips there.
Great, thank you. Can we talk for just a minute about the issue of serving essential personnel? Someone asked, does it mean that the essential personnel parents are already enrolled in the program? Do programs need to accept children from the outside of their enrolled program in order to receive the funds? Just some questions around kind of the stipulations about essential personnel. What kind of flexibility there is with that charge.
So I think the easy answer to this is that if you're willing to serve essential personnel, that's basically all we're asking in terms of the eligibility for the CARES grant. So if you're willing to serve folks of essential personnel, that is really the only requirement that we have for you to apply for these funds. Does that answer the question, do you think? I
think so. We'll welcome folks to, plug another question into the box if that didn't cover it. Tara, thank you. I think this is, kind of another question that's related is, does a program need to pay for advertising to find more children to care for? How can programs that are willing to serve more children, and especially children of essential personnel, how can we match them with the demand or the need on the part of parents that are essential personnel?
So that goes back to the Child Care Aware website, because you want to make sure that you are registering with Child Care Aware, because that's going to be the essential piece to being able to connect the folks that need, the parents that need child care with your particular day, whether it's a family day home or center. So those are the crucial aspects of it. I don't think you're not required to do any type of advertising. I think I know sometimes it's difficult though when folks, when you may be open and you're seeking more children or whatever. I think if you reach out to even your licensing inspector and folks that like that in addition to Child Care Aware, so that if they hear of folks that are searching, that they can also drive business your way, if that makes sense. And I would also reach out to any local healthcare providers that are around your particular center if you're looking for folks to care for, children to care for. I think that's a good place to start, because as Jenna alluded to earlier, we're on the calls a lot with like Virginia Healthcare Association and the hospital associations who are trying to make sure that their staff have the appropriate placements for folks. So that would be one of the first places I would reach out to, is just make sure they are aware that you are open and providing services.
Excellent, thank you. Another question, if a center receives an email informing them that their application was incomplete, can this communication tell the center specifically what they're missing? Centers have been receiving an email listing possible problems with applications.
So I'm not sure when, I mean, hopefully this has rectified itself somewhat. We do have another team that we put in place last week that are working specifically for the folks who have incomplete applications. And when we rolled out the information regarding the change for the W-9s, that you didn't just have to use the Virginia W-9, that you could use the federal form, we automatically went back and tried to match folks up so that they wouldn't have to resubmit their application. Now, there are other reasons why, your application could have been deemed incomplete, but we do have a team that is working specifically to try to help providers understand exactly what is needed and what has been missing. So hopefully that has improved as we've kind of walked through this process this past week. So we've asked that they, give some specifics in regards to whatever, those pieces that from the application that may be missing. I think typically what we see most would be, with the W-9 and some of the EIN information missing and things like that. I think that was one of the biggest pieces. So it could be if a facility, has shut down or surrendered their license, if they need to get their license, back up, or, reapply for the license piece. And we've tried to assure people that will be looked at expeditiously by our team and our staff. So hopefully those have rectified themselves, but don't hesitate to shoot an email back to that ask for care. The other piece of that is if you have something that that has been incomplete and you're trying to resubmit it. I think I saw that somebody had said that they had inadvertently put their social security number instead of their EIN number. Just make sure when you submit that information that in the subject line that you put resubmit, because that'll go to a different team that will help match up the information that you've already sent in, so you don't have to resubmit the whole application again.
That's helpful. Thanks, Tara. And will the team be calling the providers who have an issue or an incomplete, or is this managed by email?
So we're doing it a little bit both. If it's something that's pretty simple that we can just shoot an email out to folks and say, hey, just make sure you attach this or resubmit this particular item. We know that there are some folks that are just having difficulty in understanding the process. And so we have folks that are actually making phone calls on behalf, of our team, just so they can have a better understanding of what needs to happen. And they're walking them through the process on the phone and trying to give them an answer before they, hang up, so that they have some peace of mind and knowing that, that they got it right this time. So
Thank you, Tara, and just really want to shout out to your team. That's incredible high-touch assistance. Before I ask the next question, Anitha, would you kind of flip back to the slide showing about the PPE, where to order? We have several additional requests to see that again, and thank you. And in the meantime, a question about, is the financial assistance provided for 12 weeks or 13?
So I believe the way we calculated it, and I would definitely want to go back and look, but I think we looked at it in 3-4 week cycles is how I believe that we estimated that. Jenna, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was 3 months at 4, would be the 4 weeks for each month is how I think we estimated the funding.
Yeah, I think that's correct. And so we'll take a look at that. But yeah, that's I think right now folks should expect 12 weeks.
If folks are looking for where they can find a W-9 form, is that part of the application, or can you give them some direction?
So that's also on the website, and it is part of the application now, and it's it's posted with the grant packet. So.
Okay, thank you. A question about what types of PPE are recommended. Would that be on the Department of Health website or on DSS? The
So
types of
that's,
PPE recommended for child care providers.
so yeah, I believe, I think we have some information on our site about it, but I think there's also, again, the CDC website, and I think it would be, the typical gloves, masks. I don't know. I think it would depend on the situation as to whether gowns would be needed, but I would say that gloves and masks would probably be the two most prevalent needs for centers. And that may be something we could even add to our FAQs. That may be helpful. I don't know that we've had any questions related to that, but that might be a good.
Yeah, I think that the general guidance is mocked for infants. If I recollect the CDC guidance, right? So generally for everybody, masks, gloves, and then I think looking into if you've got real little ones, smocks.
Okay, great, thank you. We do have some folks reminding that it's important to read and complete the W-9s carefully so that doesn't foul up your application. Here's a good question that we've heard before. Will the money need to be submitted in next year's income and then taxed? So are these grants considered taxable income?
It's my understanding that they are not, because of the situation being a grant, that there's no requirement. But Jenna, have you heard anything different on that?
I think the not different. I think the tricky thing, having been involved in these type of maneuvers before, is wanting folks to talk to their own advisors about this. So again, recognizing, as you see on that FAQ list, how many different types of structures folks are, whether you're a business or a nonprofit, whether you're faith-based or an individual provider. I think I'd be sort of encourage the state not to give individual tax advice, but rather encourage folks to follow up with your advisors as you think about filing for taxes. Is probably the best guidance I've heard in the past around kind of grant programs from government.
Thank you. Here's a good question. Will there be guidance from DSS on how to integrate children and teachers back into the programs before the stay-at-home order gets lifted, in particular, assisting families and teachers with social and emotional guidance?
I think that's a really good question. I think as we start to see more relaxed guidelines and we start to, move back into, as what everybody's kind of calling the new normal, I think that, it would be reasonable to expect that maybe, that we look at developing some FAQs around that particular issue. I think we really understand that the impact of this pandemic has had, an overarching effect on our children as well as our families. So I think that we can definitely look to provide some tools and assistance in the form of FAQs as we move forward.
Terrific, thank you. If the state, let's see, as a private school, are we able to use additional rooms on our campus that have not been specifically licensed for ages 7 to 12?
Tara, would you want me to answer this one, or?
Sure.
Yeah, so I think our basic understanding is that the budget language passed last week provides flexibility for public and private schools that want to provide emergency childcare for school-age kids. And so, I would encourage folks to take a look at that. I think, Kathy, it might be something we'll figure out how to kind of get, to take a look at it. Again, consult with, attorneys or whomever as you're making that decision, but it is intended to provide an exemption from licensure for public and private schools that are serving school-age children. So not infants, not toddlers, but related to COVID-19. And we can work to get that language around. And if there's an email for that person, I think we can send it directly to that individual.
Great. We can do that. Thank you. Our center in Northern Virginia is closed, and the parents of the children enrolled in our center are not essential personnel. So is our center eligible for the grant?
I think the question is, if you reopen, are you willing to serve essential personnel? That's the overarching question that we're looking for folks and our providers to be able to provide those types of services. That's the quintessential ask.
Okay, thank you. Tara and Jenna are awesome for working around the clock for Virginia's child care centers. Kudos to you all and your teams. Someone has asked if they utilize this grant, would they also be eligible for the pandemic unemployment insurance?
Let me answer that sort of big picture and then see if Tara has anything detailed to add, at least as it relates to the intention and why we set this program up the way that we did and advised the governor to set it up in this way. We heard that there were gaps across resources. And so, we didn't want to fund based on attendance because we know that kind of goes up and down. And so this is really funded similar to quality grants, right? There's not an explicit purpose. You don't have to use this for payroll or for supplies or to address the cost of any individual kid or family. It is general grant, to fill gaps. It shouldn't preclude you from applying for other things. If you apply for anything federally, they sort of say, don't double dip. But for the purposes of this is a quality type grant with very flexible. You use it as you see fit to support your program, your kids, your families. And so it as you're thinking about I think the questions on pandemic unemployment kind of look at sort of regularly, are you receiving less money? And so you should, you'll need to answer those honestly as it relates to your individual circumstance. But again, these aren't sort of intended to account for some particular line of income or thing. It's just a general quality grant.
Thanks, Jenna. You all have ticked off most of the questions that have come in. We're just putting an offer out for the folks still on the line to see if they have any remaining questions for both of you, since you're so up for the challenge. But I also want you all to think about if there are additional things that you want to share with the audience to make sure that they're aware of, or questions that you may have of them. We have one other question that's come in. If a family is not essential personnel, do we stop them from bringing their children?
I'll take that one and then sort of see if Tara has anything to add. So, I think sort of Tara said a couple of times, this is about being willing to serve essential personnel. I also think if somebody has spent a lot of time studying what essential personnel is and is not, there's a ton of different ways that this is defined and communicated. So for the purposes of childcare in Virginia, we are encouraging folks to take a very broad definition in terms of what it takes to ensure that society is functioning. That might be essential personnel might be defined differently by your government, sort of your local government, might be defined differently by the military, might be defined differently kind of in a different community. But our real focus is on, whose jobs are essential for society to function. And there are no police, judge, and jury of essential personnel. There's a lot of discretion there. and we encourage centers to take that broadly. We also understand, and I think why we sort of, to make this work, needed to say that, you know, essential personnel should be the priority. There is not a prohibition against serving folks who don't think of themselves as essential personnel, or you don't define as essential personnel. You are allowed to serve whomever. You know, the guidance from us has been to prioritize essential personnel, but we really encourage folks to define that broadly. We think that anybody who's coming to you, you know, because they need childcare, it's probably because they need to work, right? And feeding your family, paying your rent or mortgage, you know, figuring out how we help our society recover is essential. And so we would encourage folks to not split hairs in that capacity. You know, but you know, if somebody needs to work and they need childcare, you know, it's fine to serve them. And, you know, there's no explicit sort of prohibition or says you can't do that right now.
Okay, thank you, Jenna. Anita, let's flip back to the page where Jenna had laid out a calculation about the grant funds. We have someone who's asked if her capacity is 4 children, how much money would she receive? Can you walk her through that, Jenna?
Sure. So you basically would take, oops, there's a little bit of static there. You would take it through sort of half of your capacity, which would be 2, and then you multiply it times 25 times the 4 weeks. And that would be the amount that you would be eligible for each of those 3 4-week periods.
Okay. So 2 times 25
Yep.
times
Times
4
4.
weeks for each of the 3 months. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, I think we've hit on all the questions. Lots of thank yous to both of you. Anything more you all want to share with this audience before we let folks take off for the evening?
Kathy,
Sure.
I just want to make sure folks
go Tara.
How appreciative we are of what they're doing. We understand this is difficult times, and we've, asking a lot for the application portion, and it's just amazing to see how people are coming together and what you guys are doing in the field to make these things happen. And so we just want to reinforce how proud we are to be a part of this whole process, and that if there are issues that you're having, if there's problems that you're encountering, just don't hesitate to reach out, use that website, and just understand that we are definitely here to try to get this resource into your hands as quickly as possible. So just understand that we appreciate everything you're doing.
Thanks, Tara. Jenna?
And yeah, thanks, Kathy, and thanks, Tara. So just ditto to everything that Tara said. I think both Tara and I have just deep appreciation, as does the governor and First Lady, for all of you who've remained open during an incredibly challenging time. And one ask, beyond asking, of course, for patient, but really to spread the word. We did an evening webinar tonight because we wanted to reach out to our family day homes. We know that generally speaking, folks are a little bit more isolated. We know that folks still have questions about essential personnel. Do I have to be a part of the subsidy program to be eligible for this? Am I allowed to be open? And so if everybody on this call would reach out to, 1 or 2 or 3 colleagues of theirs, it would really help us get the word out to everyone. We would like to see every dollar dedicated to this resource to be going out the door. There is not, it's not an unending source of money, but there really is enough for everybody who's open. And so we want folks to apply, and we just need your help in getting that word out there. So share the website, or share the webinar, or tell folks to attend Wednesday's webinar, or whatever it is. Just, please let people know that these resources are available to them. We'd love to spend every last dollar to support the field, and we just, in recognition of all the incredible work that folks are doing day in, day out in response to this crisis to support their their colleagues, their educators, their families, and most importantly, our young learners in the Commonwealth.
Thank you, Jenna, and so appreciate how all of you at the Department of Social Services and Department of Education have worked to strike the right balance between accountability for these funds and also trying to make it really facilitate the process for the funds getting to these amazing providers. Any of you who signed up for this registered for this webinar will be receiving a recording of this event as well as the slides. So those of you who have asked for copies of the slides, you will be receiving that, and we'll also include in that information links to some of these resources and documents that have been referenced during the conversation. So just want to thank everyone again for spending the evening with us and for your interest and support in this work. Thanks to the First Lady, to Jenna and Tara for being part of this and bringing such great information and encouraging words. And we wish everyone a good evening. Thanks again.